The biggest misconception in FC is that tactic is what makes you play better. It's the principles you look for that make you a good player. Big Fads here with an updated guide on how to play like a top 1% player no matter the meta. Throughout the years, I've consistently been able to play at a high level, reaching the top 200 last year in the first 2 months, playing my own way no matter what the meta has been like. Now, I've been able to play like this each year because I have some principles of play that I apply no matter the meta. These guides have been based around my thought process of what I coach in real life. As I learn more, I'm happy to share whatever could be helpful. Now, this will be similar to the videos I put up last year, and I'll be releasing newer videos that are more in-depth into specific areas of FC25, such as tempo in your play, when to progress and how to progress, what to think about in transition, and many more. The principles I'll be sharing with you are basic fundamentals, and the reason they are effective is because while FC is a game, in its essence it's still football, and the basic fundamentals that apply to real football are applicable in FC. You can always compete if you're good at the footballing aspects of FC, no matter the meta, especially if you're playing our principles that suit you. All the clips in this guide are taken straight out of my stream to show you that they are applicable at the highest level, except the 3 clips that showed how I've played throughout the years. One of the most common mistakes I see people make is that they play out of habit and routine. When you play with intent and purpose, that's when you're forcing your opponent to make a mistake. But purpose can be very tricky to explain. So you break it down into different principles of play that apply to different scenarios, which makes it easier to learn and know what to do in different situations. Now take a look at this example that is currently playing. I'll let it play with no interruptions for now. At the end of this video, I'll go back to this clip where we'll replay it, but with a breakdown of how I'm applying my principles of play to the clip itself. The same principles that I will be sharing with you in this video. The goal being to show how it gives me purpose in different parts of the play, which ultimately leads to a goal. Every decision you make is based on what information you have. The more information you have, the easier it is to stay calm and not lose the ball. You get information by scanning the pitch. When you do scan, there are 3 things you want to look. Firstly, where are your players? Secondly, where's your opponent? And thirdly, where is the space you can use? And how do we get to that space? Every decision you're going to make is always going to be based around these 3 things. Now, there are 2 things you have to keep in mind when scanning. Firstly, you want to do it as much as possible. I rarely look at the ball when I'm playing. I'm always looking at what's happening around me. And secondly, the overall information doesn't really change. So if you're under pressure, you can still rely on what you already know. As soon as Yaya gets the ball, I make him go for a run when he passes it. Now, when I'm in this position, I'm aware that I can create a numerical advantage up top, or I can look to take advantage of the extra man that Yaya provides, seeing as my opponent's defenders are occupied by my 2 strikers, which means he will be free when he shows up. I don't really have to scan for him. Now, there are 2 main scenarios you can scan in. The first one is when the ball is in between 2 players. You take the time to look around, see where everyone is. The second time is when you have the ball, but you're under no pressure. It could be a dead ball situation, it could be when you play it backwards, and scanning the pitch includes using the minimap as well. The most important aspect of composure. You need to know what option the player has before you pass it to him. If you don't have an idea what to do when the ball gets to a specific player, then that option is more than likely bad. That is usually how you panic and lose the ball. When you know what options your player has before you pass it to him, it allows you to make decisions based on what your opponent does. As in the example that's playing in the background, I pay attention to his movement and take the option that he's not covering, which leads to a goal. The best direction to pass in is into the direction your player is facing. It is the most natural way to pass. It allows you to keep your speed in your attack while making sure the passes you make are successful more often than not. This also means passing backwards is optimal in some instances. It's better to lose the opportunity for an attack and start over than making a bad pass and losing the ball. This is especially important whenever the game doesn't pass the ball to where you want to. Your first instinct in those situations should be to pass it toward the direction the player is facing, which is exactly what I do when the pass goes to the wrong player here. This is one of my core principles of play. Look to play where there is space. Another common mistake I see people make is that they try to play into an area they want to be, not realizing there's space somewhere else. The easiest way to see if someone is stressed while playing is to pay attention to where they are playing. Each game you play is unique, and the game is dynamic. Your opponent might change tactics, might become more composed, might lose more focus. Trying to force an attack that works once or twice, but your opponent adapted and learned to defend against, will just make you frustrated. Look for where your opponent has left space in that specific attack. That's what you want to exploit. There are two main things to focus on in this example. Firstly, we notice that our opponent has picked a CDM and is moving up, which means Redondo will get space if she gets the ball. Secondly, we notice that Darder is making a run into the box. This means Redondo has two pockets of space we can use when she gets the ball. When he switches to defender, he cuts off the space that is up top, which means we want to exploit the space that is in front of Darder. It is impossible to defend the entire pitch. An easy trigger to knowing where there's space is the direction your opponent is pressing from. I used it in my earlier example, and I will be showing another one. Take a look at this example. When the ball gets to Carmona, we notice that Adama is pressing from the middle part of the pitch, which means area he's gonna leave is playable space for us if we want. By passing it to Hemp, notice that the right back is pressing, so we make her release the ball immediately and go on a run into the space that is now vacated. As the pass goes back to Olga, Darder now has a little bit of space that he can use to get past the striker. And immediately, when she gets the ball, the defender pushes up, which means there is space now behind him. By playing into the space that he has created by pressing, we have put him in an undefendable situation. If he covers Hemp, Redondo is open. If he covers Redondo, Hemp is open. He decides to cover for Hemp, which allows us to pass to Redondo, and we get a good sequence and a nice goal out of it. There are ways for you to create space that you can exploit, and there are a few principles to this. The first one is passing the ball. Every time you pass the ball, you force your opponent to react and in turn move him around. In this example, when we pass the ball to Trent, our opponent is forced to react and they push up with their left back. This opens up space behind them for us to exploit. A simple pass back to the middle forces our opponent to react to that instead of the space that's opened up, which allows us an easy pass through and eventually a goal. The second principle to creating space is the movement of your own players. A player making a run is only telling you, I'm an option. You do not have to pass it to him. When focusing on passing the ball to a player making a run, you're missing the shadow that run is creating. Sometimes the purpose of a run isn't to get the ball, but it is to open up space for your teammates instead. I have a red card in this example. By using the shadow of a run, it allows me to still create good opportunities. When Olga gets the ball, we can see that Darder is making a run. And we notice that the defender is following that run. This means that the shadow the run creates is open for Redondo to use. Find a few good passes that eventually lead to a goal. Combining the earlier tips, you can use them to create space to allow you to play to the central part of the pitch. Keep in mind though, the central part of the pitch, it is the most accessible part to your opponent. You want to move in to draw in your opponent's press to move back out. One of the most overlooked aspects of passing and general movement of your players is that it shifts your opponent's attention. By doing it many times, you're forcing him to shift his focus, and this is how you force him to make a mistake, by him being late in shifting his focus, which allows you to take advantage of an opening that shows itself. This example is fairly straightforward. Gacy gets to the ball, we're in a 4 versus 2. We see that there is space up top, but we've also noticed that the defender that's coming in has more momentum, so we want to attack at the bottom. We do pass it up top to shift his focus, takes his defender and moves him up, which then allows us more time when the ball gets back to Gacy. His player switching becomes a little bit late, which allows us to take a touch and a goal. Which brings us to the most fundamental and important aspect of attacking and creating space. You need to ask the defender questions. Taking into account our earlier tips, we are continuously asking the defender questions in each scenario. If we look back at some of the examples, these are the questions we're asking. It puts the defender under constant pressure and allows us to take advantage of whatever opening that shows itself. And the more questions we can ask during an attack, the harder it becomes for your opponent to keep up. This is the foundation of any successful team that passes a lot, and it's incredibly effective against press. If you look at all of the examples I've shown you in this video, this will be included in every single one of them. You see a player or space that you want to use, but you're not sure on how to get there without losing the ball. The third man is your solution. You look for someone that has a better opportunity to reach that potential player or that potential area without as much risk. That someone is the third man. In this example, as we're moving up, we notice that our opponent has picked his midfielder and started to apply pressure. This means that he's leaving space for us to use behind him. Also notice that our midfielder is making a run upwards, we want her to use that space. If we are to turn against her, we'll make it very obvious that we're going to look to pass to her, and his midfielder will be very close to apply pressure immediately. So instead, we turn away and draw in the press and use the third man as an outlet to get to the space that Cuthbert has run into. As a result, he's forced to use a central back. Either he follows, which allows us to run up, or he presses, which opens up space in behind. As he decides to press by still cutting the passing lane to Gacy, we use the third man again to get into the space that has opened up, which gives us a good opportunity and a goal. Building onto this, you want to look for options that are unmarked. This seems pretty obvious in theory. There is a huge misconception in that a marked player is not an option. I want to highlight the difference here because a player that is marked can still be a good option. You just need to have an idea of how to use it. Don't be afraid to pass it to someone, even if he has opponents nearby. As long as you have an idea of what to do, when the ball reaches him, the play can still be made. In this example, when I pass the ball to Bellingham, I know that he has a player right behind him and that the two closest players are opponents. However, my whole plan of passing to him right now is to get the defender to move with me. As he has a little bit of space in front of him, we take a touch downwards and move with it, which opens up space behind the defender. A few quick passes allows us to take advantage of that space and gets us an equalizer. Another common misconception people have is that by playing patiently, which means passing the ball around, you're playing without speed and intensity. The 3 clips that I'll be showing now are from the same game. We'll show you how I change up my style of play. If you're playing slow all the time, that is true, but by playing patiently until an opportunity arises to incorporate some of these tips, you're alternating from slow to quick play while still being patient, which makes you very unpredictable and a lot harder to play against. You're adding another question the defender has to ask himself. Is he going to slow down or is he going to play fast? And that gives you a split second to take advantage of an opening that shows itself. This is another core principle of play. When you get to your opponent's half, you get too excited to attack without paying attention to what possibilities you have on the pitch. You want to play into whatever area you have the upper hand. And usually that is somewhere where you have a numerical advantage, seeing as it makes it a lot easier to incorporate some of these tips, especially in asking the defender questions. In this example, we start moving backwards to give ourselves some time. When we pass the ball to Cuthbert, the plan is never to attack through that side. We've got 6 players on the bottom side of the pitch, and our opponent has 4. We want to use that numerical advantage. We pass it down and notice that there is space outside. We make sure that our touch is close to us so that we can adapt to whatever the defender does. He decides to cover for the space out wide, which opens up space for us to run into, and it gives us a more comfortable lead. Going back to the original clip I showed, every single tip I just mentioned is ticked here. We always know what our options are because we're scanning a lot. Always passing in the direction the player is facing. We are playing where there is space, even when the pass goes the way we doesn't want it to go. We just make sure to adapt, but we're making sure to create some space on top of that, usually by playing into the area where the press is coming from, by making sure to move our opponent around with our runs and with our passing. And all this passing is making sure to shift his focus. Every other pass is a type of third man pass, and all of our options that we're passing to are unmarked, and we're attacking through a numerical advantage. It is impossible to think about all of these things while you play. For me, they've become a habit, so I don't really have to think about them while playing. However, when I do make a mistake, I can usually pinpoint which one of these tips I wasn't following. It could be that I wasn't adapting to a bad pass. It could be that I wasn't playing in a natural direction. I was making a pass that is hard for him to execute, or I was playing into an area where my opponent had more players. I'd recommend to focus on one of these things and get that into an habit and instinct before you move on to the next one. But yeah, that was all I had for this guide. If you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment and I'll do my best to answer, or you can hit me up on any social media. I do stream my games on Twitch if you want to catch up outside the videos. But until next time, I hope this is helpful and take care.